"There's a camera up there," the waitress whispered, and the most dangerous man in the room didn't look up. He froze, because he knew what that meant. Someone wasn't watching the diner. They were watching him. And instead of ripping it out, he did something far worse. He let them keep filming. If this story pulled you in, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss what's coming next. I've got another unforgettable story dropping tomorrow. And while you're here, jump into the comments and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing our community from all around the world. Alright, let's get back into it. She wasn't supposed to be paying attention. Just a waitress finishing the closing checklist at the Crossroads Diner on a Tuesday that felt like every other Tuesday. Wipe the counters, refill the sugar caddies. Don't stare at the man in the back booth who wore silence like armor and had tattoos climbing his neck like warnings written in ink. But Amora Miller was 24 years old, sharp-eyed, and trained since childhood to notice what didn't match. The diner was nearly empty just past 11 p.m. That dead hour between the late shift workers and the insomniacs who'd arrive around 2 a.m. seeking pie and silence. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead with the tired persistence of something that refused to die. The smell was familiar. Burnt coffee, fryer grease that had soaked into the walls over decades, and the faint sweetness of cherry pie that never quite left the air. Alan Dominato sat in his usual booth, back to the wall, black suit sharp despite the late hour. His collar hung open just enough to reveal the edge of intricate tattoos that disappeared beneath expensive fabric, dark ink that spoke of allegiances and choices that couldn't be undone. His dark hair was styled back, his jawline sharp and unforgiving, his presence commanding without effort. He was 35, but carried himself with the controlled stillness of someone who'd learned early that movement meant vulnerability. His men stood near the entrance, two shadows in dark clothing, close enough to respond, but far enough to give the illusion of privacy. One leaned against the wall by the door, arms crossed. The other stood with hands clasped in front of him, scanning the parking lot through the window. Both wore the same expression. Alert neutrality. Amora had served Alan for 6 months, long enough to know he took his coffee black, never looked at the menu, and tipped exactly 30% every time. Long enough to know that when he was here, the diner became something other than a diner, a temporary embassy, a neutral zone where things were decided without words. She'd learned not to ask questions, not to linger, not to make eye contact unless he initiated it first, but she'd also learned to watch. Tonight, she was refilling the sugar dispensers near the service counter when her gaze drifted upward, a habit born from years of checking for leaks in cheap apartments, for ceiling stains that meant trouble was coming. The diner's ceiling was old, exposed beams crisscrossing above like the skeleton of something that refused to die. Dust clung to everything up there, thick and undisturbed, the kind of grime that accumulated over years of nobody looking up. Except there was a spot that didn't match. Amora froze, sugar caddy suspended mid-pour. Above the prep station door, right where the main beam crossed the service path, there was a circle, too clean, too deliberate. The dust around it was thick as fur, but that one spot was clear like something had been wiped away or placed there recently. And nestled in the center of that clean circle was something small, black, and unmistakably lens-shaped. Her breath caught in her throat. She didn't point, didn't raise her voice, didn't even shift her body language in a way that would draw attention. Her mother's lessons echoed in her mind. When you see something dangerous, never announce it. The room has ears, the walls have eyes. Instead, she finished refilling the sugar with hands that wanted to shake but didn't, set the container down with practiced calm, and walked slowly toward Alan's booth. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard she could feel it in her ears. But her face remained neutral, the face of someone bringing a coffee refill. Nothing more. She stopped beside his table. He didn't look up immediately, his attention fixed on his phone, thumb scrolling through something she couldn't see. The light from the screen cast shadows across his face, making the tattoos on his neck seem to move. Amora leaned in close, as if asking about dessert, her voice dropping to barely more than breath. "There's a camera up there." For the first time in 6 months, Alan Dominato went completely still. Not the relaxed stillness of a man at ease, the frozen stillness of a predator calculating distance, angles, survival. His dark eyes didn't flick upward, they narrowed inward, processing, measuring the weight of her words against the architecture of the room. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. His breathing slowed to something deliberate. One of his men near the door shifted, hand drifting toward his jacket. The other's posture changed, shoulders squaring, but Alan raised one finger, barely a movement, just the slightest lift from where his hand rested on the table, and both men froze mid-motion. The diner didn't change. The neon still buzzed. The coffee machine still hissed. The jukebox in the corner still played something soft and forgettable, some old country song about roads and regret. But everything else had shifted. Alan's hand lowered slowly. He picked up his coffee cup with deliberate calm and took a slow sip, his eyes scanning the room through peripheral vision, measuring sightlines and angles without giving anything away. Steam rose from the cup, momentarily obscuring his face. Then he set it down and met her gaze directly for the first time ever. His eyes were darker than she'd realized. Not cruel, but absolutely certain, the eyes of someone who'd made impossible decisions and lived with them. Where? His voice was so low it barely qualified as sound. Amora's pulse was a drum solo, but she kept her voice steady. Above the prep door, left beam, small, black, lens pointed at your booth. Alan didn't look up, didn't turn his head, didn't react in any way that would signal awareness to whoever was watching. Instead, he lifted his coffee cup again, using the motion as cover to glance toward the kitchen area, then back to his phone. How long? I don't know, but the dust pattern says recent. Days, maybe a week? Not longer. Something flickered across Alan's expression, not fear, but recognition. The kind of look that said he'd just confirmed a suspicion he'd been carrying but hadn't wanted to name. His free hand curled into a fist on the table, knuckles whitening briefly before relaxing again. He reached into his jacket slowly, pulled out his phone with controlled movements, and typed something with his thumb. Within seconds, one of his men approached the table, moving with the practiced silence of someone who'd learned to be invisible. He bent low, ear near Alan's mouth, listening to words Amora couldn't hear. Then he straightened and disappeared through the back exit without a sound, the door closing behind him with barely a click. Alan looked at Amora again. This time, his expression had changed, still controlled, but with something else underneath. Calculation, strategy, and something that might have been respect. Go to the kitchen, he said quietly. Stay there until I tell you otherwise. It wasn't a threat. It was protection. Amora nodded and walked toward the kitchen doors, her legs steady despite the adrenaline screaming through her veins. As she pushed through the swinging door, she glanced back once. Alan was still sitting exactly where he'd been, coffee cup in hand, posture relaxed, face unreadable, but his eyes were different now. He wasn't just in the room anymore, he was hunting. The kitchen was hotter than the dining area, even at this late hour. Industrial ovens radiated stored heat, and the fluorescent lights overhead were brighter, harsher, turning everything into sharp edges and deep shadows. Amora stood near the prep station, arms crossed, trying to look busy while her mind raced through every possible outcome of what she'd just done. She'd whispered a warning to a man most people crossed the street to avoid. She'd told Alan Dominato, a man whose name appeared in newspapers with words like alleged and suspected, that someone was watching him. And now she was standing in a kitchen, waiting, while men in expensive suits made decisions she couldn't see. Through the small circular window in the swinging door, she could see Alan still sitting in his booth. He hadn't moved, hadn't changed position. To anyone watching, and someone definitely was, he looked like a man finishing his coffee, checking his phone, completely unaware that his world had just tilted sideways. But Amora could see the difference. The way his shoulders held tension he was carefully masking. The way his thumb scrolled across his phone screen with purpose now, not idle browsing. The way his eyes tracked movement without his head turning. He was performing normalcy while his mind worked through angles she couldn't begin to calculate. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The back door opened and the man who'd left earlier returned, moving with the same ghost-like silence. He approached Alan's booth, leaned in, spoke briefly. Alan's expression didn't change, but his hand tightened around his coffee cup for just a fraction of a second. Then he nodded once. The man pulled something from his jacket, a small tablet, the screen facing away from the camera's presumed angle, and set it on the table. Alan looked down at it, his face illuminated by blue light. Amora watched his jaw tighten, watched his breathing shift from controlled to something deeper, more dangerous. Whatever was on that screen confirmed something he hadn't wanted to believe. Alan stood slowly, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced ease, the motion smooth and unhurried. He pulled out his wallet, left cash on the table more than necessary, as always, and walked toward the kitchen, toward her. Amora's heart kicked into overdrive as the door swung open and Alan stepped into the harsh fluorescent light. Up close, away from the booth's shadows, she could see more details. The precise line of his beard, the small scar near his left eyebrow, the way the tattoos on his neck were actually words in a language she didn't recognize. wrapped in ornate designs that looked almost religious. "You were right," he said quietly, his voice cutting through the ambient hum of refrigerators and ventilation. "It's live, broadcasting." Amora's stomach dropped. To who? That's what we're going to find out. Alan's eyes studied her with an intensity that made her want to look away, but she forced herself to hold his gaze. "How did you spot it?" "I always look up," Amora said. "Habit from growing up in bad apartments. You learn to check for problems before they become disasters." Something shifted in Alan's expression, not quite a smile, but a recognition of shared experience. "Smart. My mother taught me," Amora said. "She said people who survive aren't the ones who see everything. They're the ones who see what doesn't belong." Alan nodded slowly. "Your mother was right." He glanced back toward the dining area, then returned his attention to her. "The camera's been there for 3 days. Professional installation, hardwired into the building's electrical system. Signal routing through a private server." "Not police?" Amora asked. "No." Alan's jaw tightened. "Police would use different equipment. This is personal." The way he said personal made Amora's skin prickle. This wasn't about law enforcement. This was about someone watching Alan specifically, tracking his movements, his meetings, his behavior. "Why here?" she asked. "Why this diner?" "Because this is where I feel safe," Alan said, and there was something almost vulnerable in the admission. "This is neutral ground. Or it was supposed to be." Amora understood immediately. The diner wasn't just a meeting place, it was a sanctuary. A place where Alan could conduct business without the paranoia of his usual environments. And someone had violated that. "What are you going to do?" she asked. Alan was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant, calculating. Then he looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Nothing." "Nothing? I'm going to leave it exactly where it is," Alan said. "And I'm going to let whoever's watching think they're winning." Amora stared at him. "That's insane." "That's strategy." Alan's voice was calm, almost gentle, like he was explaining something to a student. "If I tear it down, they know I've found it. They adapt. They disappear. I lose my chance to find out who's behind this. But they're watching everything you do. So I'll give them something to watch." Alan interrupted. "Something that looks real but tells them exactly what I want them to know." He paused, studying her face. "The question is, can I trust you?" The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. "Trust me with what?" Amora asked carefully. "With knowing this exists. With keeping your observations to yourself. With understanding that what happens in this diner over the next few days might look like one thing but mean something else entirely." Amora felt the weight of what he was asking. He was inviting her into something dangerous, something that existed in the shadows where people like her weren't supposed to go. Every instinct her mother had taught her said to walk away, to quit this job, to forget she'd ever noticed that camera. But another part of her, the part that had always been curious, that had always seen patterns others missed, wanted to understand. Wanted to know why someone would surveil a man like Alan Dominato. Wanted to see how this played out. "I won't say anything," Amora said quietly. Alan studied her for another long moment, then nodded. "You should go home. Regular time. Regular routine. Don't change anything. And tomorrow? Tomorrow you come back to work like tonight never happened. You serve coffee. You refill sugar caddies. You watch." His eyes locked onto hers with absolute certainty. "But this time, you're watching for me." Before Amora could respond, Alan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression darkening. "Problem?" Amora asked. "Development," Alan corrected. He looked back at her one more time. "Thank you. For noticing. For telling me. Not everyone would have." "Why not?" Alan's smile was cold and knowing. "Because most people prefer not to see. It's safer that way." He turned and walked back through the swinging door, leaving Amora alone in the too-bright kitchen with a choice she'd already made but didn't fully understand yet. She'd just become part of something she couldn't control. And somehow, that didn't frighten her as much as it should have. Amora didn't sleep that night. She lay in her studio apartment, 3rd floor, east side, where the streetlight bled through thin curtains and turned everything amber, staring at the ceiling and replaying the whisper over and over. "There's a camera up there." 4 words that had changed something fundamental, though she couldn't yet name what. By morning, exhaustion had settled into her bones, but her mind was still racing. She showered, dressed in her usual uniform, black pants, white button-down, comfortable shoes, and stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Her mother looked back at her. Same dark eyes, Same sharp cheekbones. Same expression of someone perpetually calculating risk. Elena Miller had been a housekeeper for wealthy families, moving through expensive homes like a ghost, learning to read people by the things they thought no one noticed. She'd taught Amora that survival wasn't about being the strongest or the smartest, it was about being the most observant. Watch their hands, Mija, not their faces. Hands tell you what they're about to do. Eyes tell you what they want you to think. Elena had died 3 years ago, cancer that spread faster than anyone expected, but her lessons remained. They'd kept Amora employed, kept her safe, kept her invisible in a world that preferred women like her to stay that way. Until last night, when she'd chosen to be seen. Amora arrived at the diner at 4 p.m. for the evening shift. The parking lot was half full, the dinner crowd trickling in. Inside, everything looked exactly the same. Same booths, same scratched counters, same jukebox playing songs that were old when her mother was young. But the camera was still there. She could see it now. Even from across the room, that small black circle above the prep door, nestled in dust that nobody else bothered to look at. Knowing it was there changed everything. Every customer became a potential threat. Every glance felt weighted with surveillance. Jerry, the day shift manager, nodded at her from behind the register. "You're on tables 1 through 8 tonight." Ramirez called in sick. "Got it," Amora said, tying her apron. The shift started normally. Families with tired kids, truckers ordering coffee and pie, a couple arguing in whispers over something that had started long before they'd entered the diner. Amora moved through it all with practiced efficiency, her body on autopilot while her mind stayed alert. Alan didn't arrive until almost 8 p.m. She saw him through the window first, the black Mercedes pulling into the lot, parking in the same spot he always used. He emerged alone this time. No visible security. Just a man in a dark suit walking through the early evening heat like he owned the air around him. When he entered, their eyes met for a fraction of a second. No acknowledgement, no signal, just a flicker of recognition before he moved to his usual booth. Amora gave him 5 minutes, then approached with a coffee pot and a menu he'd never open. "Evening," she said, her voice professionally neutral. "Coffee. Black," Alan replied, not looking up from his phone. She poured, noting the way he angled his body slightly away from the camera's direct line of sight. Casual, natural, but deliberate. As she turned to leave, he spoke quietly. 15 minutes. Back door. Bring your purse." Amora's hand tightened on the coffee pot, but she didn't react otherwise, just nodded once and walked away. 15 minutes felt like hours. She served customers, refilled drinks, cleared plates, all while her pulse hammered a countdown in her ears. When the time came, she told Jerry she was taking her break, grabbed her purse from the staff locker, and slipped through the kitchen to the back exit. Alan was waiting in the alley, leaning against the brick wall beside a dumpster that smelled like old grease in summer heat. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of orange and purple. In this light, his tattoos looked like they were moving. "You came," he said. "You told me to. I asked you to. There's a difference." Alan pushed off the wall, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed but eyes sharp. "I need to ask you some questions. Personal ones. You can say no." Amora's guard went up immediately. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that tell me if I can trust you." Alan's gaze was steady, assessing without being predatory. "Where did you grow up?" "South Side, near the rail yards." "Family?" "Just my mother. She died 3 years ago." "I'm sorry." The words sounded genuine. "What did she do?" "Housekeeping. Private homes. She moved around a lot. Different families every few years." Amora paused, then added, "She said it was safer that way. If you stayed too long, you saw too much. And people don't like being seen." Alan's expression shifted recognition again, like pieces of a puzzle clicking together. "She taught you to notice things. She taught me to survive by noticing things." Amora corrected. "To read a room before entering it. To know when someone was lying by how they held their shoulders. To see patterns in behavior that meant trouble was coming." "Why?" "Because we were invisible. Housekeepers, waitresses, cleaners. People look through us, but that means we see everything." Amora met his eyes directly. "My mother said that was our power. We could see what rich people, powerful people, wanted to keep hidden, as long as we never acknowledged it out loud." Alan was quiet for a long moment, studying her with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable but somehow wasn't. "Yesterday you broke that rule," he said finally. "You acknowledged something out loud. To me. Why?" Amora had asked herself that same question all night. Because it felt wrong. Not morally wrong, strategically wrong. You come to that diner because it's safe. Someone violated that. And she hesitated, searching for the right words. I don't like bullies. I don't like people who cheat by watching from the shadows. Something like respect flickered across Alan's face. You realize what you've done, don't you? By telling me about that camera, you've made yourself visible. To me, to whoever's watching. You can't go back to being invisible now. I know. Does that scare you? Amora considered lying, then decided against it. Yes, but not enough to make me regret it. Alan nodded slowly, like she'd passed some test she hadn't known she was taking. I had someone look into your background. I hope you don't mind. Amora's jaw tightened. And you're exactly who you appear to be. No criminal record, no debts, no connections to anyone in my world or anyone who'd want to harm me. Just a woman working 2 jobs to pay rent on a studio apartment while taking online classes in graphic design. The invasion of privacy should have angered her. Instead, it made a strange kind of sense. You had to be sure. I did, because what I'm about to ask you requires trust. Alan pulled his phone from his pocket, typed something, then showed her the screen. It was a surveillance feed, the view from the camera in the diner, showing his empty booth from above. This is what they're watching, Alan said. Every move I make, every person I meet, every conversation I have. For the past 3 days, someone has been building a map of my behavior. Who? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. He pocketed the phone. And I need you to help me do it. Amora's breath caught. How? By doing exactly what you've always done. Watch, notice. But this time, you're not watching me. Alan's eyes were dark and certain. You're watching everyone else. The surveillance feed haunted Amora for the next 2 days. She couldn't stop thinking about it, that bird's-eye view of Alan's booth. The perfect angle capturing every gesture, every person who sat across from him, every subtle shift in body language. Whoever had placed that camera knew exactly what they were looking for. This wasn't random. This was targeted, precise, and deeply personal. Alan came to the diner every night that week, always at different times, always with different people. Amora watched them all with new eyes, cataloging faces and behaviors the way her mother had taught her. A businessman in his 50s who kept checking his watch. A younger man with nervous hands who barely touched his coffee. A woman in expensive clothes who smiled too much. Any of them could be the reason for the camera, or none of them. On Thursday night, Alan arrived alone again. This time, when Amora brought his coffee, he slid a folded piece of paper across the table as she set down the cup. She palmed it smoothly, years of invisible service making the motion automatic. In the kitchen, she unfolded it. Red sedan. License plate GHT 4729. Parked across the street. Driver hasn't moved in 40 minutes. Watch him. Amora's pulse quickened. She moved to the small window by the back door and peered out into the parking lot. Sure enough, there was a red sedan parked under a broken streetlight, dark enough that she hadn't noticed it before. She couldn't see the driver clearly, just a silhouette behind the wheel, motionless, watching. She went back to work, but kept glancing toward the window whenever she passed. The sedan didn't move, didn't leave, just sat there like a predator waiting for the right moment. Around 9 p.m., Alan's phone buzzed. She saw his expression change, something hardening in his jaw, a coldness settling into his eyes. He stood, left money on the table, and walked out without looking at her. 30 seconds later, the red sedan's engine started. It pulled out slowly, following Alan's Mercedes at a careful distance. Amora's hands shook as she cleared Alan's table. This was real. This wasn't just surveillance, this was active pursuit. Someone was tracking Alan's every move, and they weren't being subtle about it anymore. Her shift ended at 11 p.m. She walked to her car in the mostly empty parking lot, keys already threaded between her fingers the way her mother had taught her. The night air was thick and humid, carrying the smell of asphalt and distant rain. Her phone buzzed as she unlocked her car door. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her thumb the accept button. Get in your car and drive home normally, Alan's voice said without preamble. Don't look around. Don't change your routine. I'll call you in 20 minutes. The line went dead. Amora's heart hammered as she slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled out of the parking lot. She forced herself not to check the rearview mirror obsessively, not to drive faster than usual, not to do anything that would signal awareness. The 20-minute drive to her apartment felt like hours. She parked in her usual spot, climbed the stairs to her third-floor unit, and locked the door behind her. Only then did she allow herself to breathe. Her phone rang exactly 20 minutes after the first call. "I'm sorry to involve you like this," Alan said, his voice quieter than she'd ever heard it. "But you're already involved, and I need you to understand what's happening." "Tell me," Amora said, sitting on her second-hand couch in the dark. "The camera isn't law enforcement. We confirmed that. The signal routes through a shell server owned by a logistics company called Meridian Transport. On paper, it's a legitimate freight operation. But I've used them before 3 years ago, when I needed to move. Sensitive cargo. The owner is a man named Felix Crane, ex-military, very good at making things disappear. You think he's behind this? I thought he might be. Until tonight." Alan's voice tightened. "My tech team traced the server access logs. The footage isn't just being recorded, it's being accessed in real time by 3 different IP addresses. One of them belongs to Crane, but the other 2," he paused. "One is registered to an apartment in the financial district. Expensive. The kind of place you don't rent on a freight manager's salary. Who lives there? That's what I need to find out. But the 3rd IP address is what concerns me." Another pause, heavier this time. "It's accessing the feed from inside my own organization." The words landed like a physical blow. Amora sat forward, gripping the phone tighter. "Someone on your side is watching you? Not just watching, selling my movements, my meetings, my patterns. Someone close enough to know where I'd feel safe is feeding that information to people who want to use it against me." "Who?" "I have 3 possibilities, all of them people I've trusted for years. All of them with access to my schedule, my properties, my operations." Alan's voice was cold now, controlled fury beneath the surface. "One of them is betraying me, and I can't move against them until I know which one." Amora's mind raced through the implications. "So, you're going to let them keep watching, let them think they're winning." "Exactly. I'm going to give them a performance. Make them believe I'm vulnerable, distracted, making mistakes. And when they move to take advantage..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "What do you need from me?" Amora asked. "Keep doing what you're doing. Watch the diner. Watch who comes in, who sits with me, who reacts when things happen. You see patterns I can't, because you're invisible to them. They look through you, until I'm not invisible anymore. If this goes wrong, if they realize you're helping me..." Alan's voice carried weight now, genuine concern. "You'll be in danger, real danger. I can offer you protection, but I can't guarantee your safety. You can still walk away from this. I'll understand." Amora thought about her mother, about all those years of watching from the shadows, about being invisible as a survival strategy, about how that invisibility had felt like armor but also like a cage. "I'm not walking away," she said quietly. "Why not?" "Because you're right. I see things. And what I see is someone being hunted by people who are supposed to be on his side. That's not just dangerous, it's wrong. And she searched for the right words. "I'm tired of just watching. I want to do something that matters." Alan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried something new, not just respect, but genuine gratitude. "Then we do this together. But carefully. Whoever's behind this has already demonstrated patience and resources. They won't hesitate to remove obstacles, including you. I understand." "Good. Tomorrow night, I'm meeting with someone. Tall man, gray suit, probably in his 40s. I need you to watch how he reacts when I tell him I'm considering a new logistics partner. Watch his hands, his breathing. Anything that seems off." "Is he one of the 3? Amora asked. "He's the first possibility," Alan confirmed. "His name is Thomas Brennan. He's been with me for 8 years, manages my supply chain, has access to everything. And if he's not the leak, then we move to the next one, and the next, until we find who's selling me out." After the call ended, Amora sat in the darkness of her apartment, watching the streetlight paint amber shapes on her ceiling. She'd crossed a line she couldn't uncross. She was no longer just a waitress who'd noticed something wrong. She was part of a hunt now, and somewhere in the city, someone who thought they were winning was about to discover they'd been seen. Thomas Brennan arrived at the diner at exactly 8:47 p.m. on Friday night. Amora spotted him through the window, tall, as Alan had described, wearing a gray suit that looked expensive but not flashy, the kind of clothing designed to project competence without drawing attention. He had salt and pepper hair cut short, a strong jaw, and the confident stride of someone accustomed to being respected. He slid into the booth across from Alan with the ease of familiarity, shaking his hand briefly before settling in. From across the diner, They looked like two businessmen discussing legitimate concerns over coffee and pie. But Amora knew better now. She approached their table with a pot of coffee and 2 menus, her expression professionally neutral. "Evening, gentlemen. Can I start you with coffee?" "Please," Brennan said, offering her a polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. The smile of someone who'd learned to be charming without actually caring. Amora poured for both of them, noting the way Brennan's hands rested flat on the table, steady, controlled. Alan had taught her to watch the hands. People could control their faces, their voices, even their breathing if they were trained. But hands betrayed tension, revealed the micro-adjustments of someone preparing to lie or fight or flee. Brennan's hands were perfectly still. "Thank you," Alan said, dismissing her with a slight nod. Amora returned to the counter but positioned herself where she could observe their booth in her peripheral vision. She refilled sugar caddies, wiped down already clean surfaces, and watched. Alan leaned back in his seat, coffee cup cradled in both hands, his posture relaxed. "I wanted to talk to you about the Meridian transport situation," he said, his voice carrying just enough for Amora to hear from her position. "I'm not satisfied with their recent performance." Brennan's expression shifted concern, maybe, or professional interest. "What kind of issues are we talking about?" "Delayed shipments, communication breakdowns. I'm starting to think we need alternatives." Alan took a sip of coffee, watching Brennan over the rim of his cup. "I've been in contact with a company out of Newark. Smaller operation, but their reliability metrics are impressive." Amora watched Brennan's hands. They didn't move, didn't tense, didn't do anything that suggested the news troubled him. "That's a significant change," Brennan said carefully. "Meridian has handled our logistics for 3 years. There'll be transition costs, learning curves. Are you sure the problems justify that level of disruption?" "I'm sure I don't like surprises," Alan replied. "And lately, Meridian has been full of them." Brennan nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "If you want to explore alternatives, I can reach out to some contacts, get proposals. We should compare options before making any final decisions." "I'd appreciate that," Alan said. "But keep it quiet for now. I don't want word getting back to Crane before we're ready to move." Of course, discretion is critical in these situations. They continued talking for another 20 minutes, numbers, logistics, the kind of business discussion that would bore most people to sleep. But Amora watched Brennan's hands the entire time, looking for the tell Alan had warned her about. They never moved, never tensed, never betrayed anything except professional concern. When Brennan finally left, shaking Alan's hand again before walking out into the night, Amora caught Alan's eye briefly. He gave the slightest shake of his head. Not him, or he's very good at lying. Later that night, after her shift ended, Amora found Alan waiting in the alley again. The air had cooled slightly, carrying the promise of rain that never seemed to arrive. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked endlessly at nothing. "Well?" Alan asked. His hands never moved. Amora said, "Not once. Even when you mentioned switching companies. Even when you said Crane's name, nothing. Either he's not the leak, or he's had serious training." Alan nodded, his expression unreadable. "Brennan was special operations before he came to work for me. Marines, 2 tours overseas. If anyone could control their physical tells, it's him. So we don't know anything. We know he didn't react the way a guilty person would. But that's not the same as innocent." Alan pulled out his phone, showed her a screenshot of access logs. The internal IP address accessed the surveillance feed 7 times today. 3 of those times were during Brennan's meeting with me. Amora's eyes widened. "Someone was watching while you talked to him? Someone wanted to see how he'd react to what I said. Which means either Brennan is the leak and he's reporting back, or someone else is monitoring him to see if he's trustworthy." "This is incredibly paranoid," Amora said. "This is survival," Alan corrected. "In my world, paranoia is just pattern recognition that hasn't been proven wrong yet." Thunder rumbled in the distance. The storm that had been threatening all week was finally moving in. "What's the next step?" Amora asked. "Tomorrow night. Different meeting. Different person." Alan's jaw tightened. "Isabella Russo. She manages my real estate holdings. 38 years old. Been with me for 6 years. Smart enough to run her own operation but stayed loyal when she could have branched out." "You don't think it's her?" "I don't want it to be her," Alan corrected. "There's a difference. She's godmother to my sister's kids. She's been to family dinners. But trust is a luxury I can't afford right now." Amora heard something in his voice, not quite pain, but something close. The cost of power, she realized. was measured in relationships that could never be fully trusted. "What am I watching for this time?" she asked. "I'm going to tell her I'm concerned about one of our properties, a warehouse on the north side. I'm going to suggest it might be compromised, that we should move our inventory to a different location." Alan's eyes were dark in the alley's shadows. "If she's the leak, that information will travel fast. My tech team will be monitoring the surveillance feed access logs. If someone checks the feed immediately after that conversation, we'll know. And if she's not the leak, then we move to possibility 3, and hope we're not wrong." Alan paused, studying her face. "You're thinking something." "I can see it," Amora acetated, then voiced the thought that had been building since Brennan's meeting. What if it's not just one person? What if multiple people are involved? Alan went very still. "Explain. The camera provides surveillance. Someone inside your organization provides context, tells the watchers what they're seeing, what it means. And someone outside, maybe Crane, maybe someone else uses that information to plan whatever they're planning. 3 different roles, 3 different people. A conspiracy," Alan said quietly. "Or a business arrangement. Information brokering. You said yourself that in your world, everything's transactional." Alan stared at her for a long moment, and Amora saw something shift in his expression, not surprise, but recognition. Like she'd articulated something he'd been feeling but hadn't wanted to acknowledge. "If you're right," he said slowly, "then this is bigger than I thought, and more dangerous." The first drops of rain began to fall, fat and heavy, hitting the asphalt like accusations. "Go home," Alan said. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we find out if Isabella Russo is family or if she's business." Amora turned to leave, then stopped. "Alan?" "Yes. When this is over, when you find out who's betraying you, what happens to them?" Alan's expression went cold, distant. "That depends on why they did it. Money, I can understand. Fear, I can forgive. Ambition." He trailed off, then met her eyes directly. "Ambition that crosses into betrayal has only one ending." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. Amora walked to her car through the intensifying rain, feeling the weight of what she'd become part of. This wasn't just about surveillance anymore. This was about loyalty and betrayal, about power and its cost, about the moment when someone decided their ambition mattered more than their word. And somewhere in the city, someone was watching a feed, believing they were unseen, not knowing that the man they were hunting had become the hunter. Isabella Russo walked into the diner like she owned the world. She was striking in a way that commanded attention without demanding it. Dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, crimson blouse under a black blazer, heels that clicked against the tile floor with rhythmic confidence. She carried herself with the assurance of someone who'd learned early that presence was power. Amora watched her slide into the booth across from Alan, leaning in to kiss his cheek with familiar affection. Not romantic, familial. The gesture of someone who'd earned proximity through years of loyalty. "You sounded serious on the phone," Isabella said, her voice carrying a slight Bronx accent she'd never bothered to polish away. "What's wrong?" Alan waited until Amora approached with coffee before answering. She poured for both of them, catching the subtle tension in Alan's shoulders, the careful neutrality in Isabella's expression. "Thank you," Isabella said, offering Amora a genuine smile. The kind servers recognized because it was so rare actual acknowledgement, not performative courtesy. Amora nodded and retreated to her observation post. "We have a problem," Alan said quietly. "The warehouse on the north side. I think it's been compromised." Isabella's hands, which had been reaching for the sugar, stopped mid-motion. "Compromised how?" "I'm not sure yet. But I've noticed increased activity in the area. Surveillance patterns that don't match normal law enforcement. And 2 of our regular contacts have gone quiet in the past week." Alan leaned forward slightly. "I want to move everything out. Tonight if possible. Can you arrange alternate storage?" From her position at the counter, Amora watched Isabella's reaction with surgical precision. The woman's hands had frozen when Alan said, "compromised," but now they resumed their motion, adding sugar to her coffee, stirring slowly, the spoon clinking against ceramic with deliberate calm. But her breathing had changed. Shallow. Faster. That's a significant operation," Isabella said carefully. "Moving that much inventory on short notice will be expensive and risky. Are you certain we need to act this quickly?" "I'm certain I don't take chances with our security," Alan replied. His voice was harder now, less familiar. "This is what I pay you for, Isabella. Solutions, not questions." Something flashed across Isabella's face, hurt. Maybe or anger at being spoken to like an employee rather than family. Her jaw tightened. I'll make the arrangements, but I need 12 hours minimum. Moving in daylight is too exposed. 12 hours, Alan agreed. And Isabella? No one else knows about this. Not Brennan, not the warehouse staff, just you and me. Isabella's eyes narrowed slightly. You don't trust your own people anymore? I trust evidence, Alan said flatly. And right now, the evidence says someone's been watching me too closely. Until I know who, I trust no one. The words landed like a slap. Isabella's expression hardened, professional distance replacing the warmth she'd arrived with. Understood. I'll call you when it's arranged. She stood, leaving her coffee untouched, and walked out without another word. The door chimed as she left, too cheerful for the tension that lingered in her wake. Amora caught Alan's eye. He gave her a barely perceptible nod, then returned his attention to his phone. 20 minutes later, Amora's own phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Her breathing changed. Hands stopped, recovered too quickly. She deleted the message immediately and continued working, her heart pounding with the weight of what she'd just witnessed. Isabella Russo, godmother to Alan's nieces and nephews, trusted lieutenant for 6 years, had just failed the test. The performance began in earnest 2 hours later. Alan had moved to a different booth, one with better visibility from the camera angle. He was on his phone, speaking in a voice just loud enough to carry angry, frustrated, the tone of a man losing control. I don't care what it costs, just make it happen. No, tonight. Everything moves tonight. Because I said so, that's why. He slammed the phone down on the table, theatrical, obvious. Then he ran his hands through his hair in a gesture of stress Amora had never seen him make before. He was performing frustration, broadcasting weakness, letting whoever was watching think they'd rattled him. Amora refilled his coffee, leaning in as she poured. Is this part of it? She whispered. All of it, Alan murmured back. They need to believe I'm panicking, that I'm making desperate moves without thinking them through. And if they take the bait, then we find out exactly who's been selling me out. For the next hour, Alan continued the show. He made 3 more calls, each one progressively more agitated. He spilled coffee, something the careful, controlled Alan Dominato would never do, and cursed loud enough for the whole diner to hear. He paid his bill in crumpled cash instead of the neat bills he always used, leaving a tip that was too small, completely out of character. To anyone watching, he looked like a man coming apart. Around midnight, one of Alan's men entered, the same one who'd investigated the camera initially. He approached Alan's booth, and they had a conversation just loud enough for the microphone to catch. The transport's ready. But sir, moving everything tonight, it's not secure. We haven't had time to vet the route. I don't care about secure, Alan snapped. I care about getting our inventory away from that compromised location. We move at 2 a.m. Tell everyone. Sir, that's an order. The man left, shoulders tight with apparent concern. Another performance, another piece of carefully crafted theater. At 12:30 a.m., Amora's phone buzzed again. 3 access spikes on the surveillance feed in the last hour. Someone's watching closely. The trap is set. She looked toward Alan's booth. He was gathering his things, preparing to leave. As he stood, he stumbled slightly, barely noticeable, but enough. Enough to suggest exhaustion, stress, a man not paying attention to his surroundings. He left without looking at her. Amora finished her shift at 1 a.m., her nerves stretched thin with anticipation. As she walked to her car, she noticed a sedan parked 3 spaces from hers, different from the red one she'd seen before. Dark blue. 2 people inside, one on a laptop that cast blue light across his face. They were watching, waiting. She drove home, following her usual route, checking her mirrors obsessively. The sedan didn't follow her, but she knew that didn't mean anything. If this conspiracy was as organized as Alan suspected, they'd have multiple teams, multiple watchers. At 2:15 a.m., her phone rang. They moved, Alan said without preamble. His voice was different now, cold, sharp, the panic completely gone. 3 vehicles converged on the north warehouse. They're inside now, expecting to find our inventory. But there's nothing there, Amora said. There's something there, Alan corrected. Just not what they're expecting. My security team is documenting everything. Every face, every vehicle, every communication. Did you identify who ordered them? Not yet. But they had to receive instructions from someone. Someone who knew about my conversation with Isabella. Someone who believed my performance. His voice carried dark satisfaction. By morning, we'll know exactly who's been watching me, and more importantly, we'll know who they're working for. What happens then? Alan was quiet for a moment. Then the real game begins. Because whoever orchestrated this, whoever bought my people and planted that camera, they're about to discover something important. What's that? That the most dangerous moment in chess isn't when you're under attack. It's when you realize your opponent has been letting you win. The line went dead. Amora sat in her dark apartment, staring at her phone, understanding finally what Alan had been building toward. This wasn't just about identifying a traitor. This was about turning the surveillance back on itself, about making the watchers reveal not just who they were, but who they answered to. The camera in the diner hadn't been a violation. It had been a gift. And Alan had just finished wrapping it. Amora didn't hear from Alan all day Saturday. She woke to silence, no texts, no calls, just the oppressive heat of late summer and the nervous energy that came from knowing something was happening but not knowing what. She tried to distract herself with online coursework, with cleaning her already clean apartment, with anything that would stop her mind from cycling through possibilities. By evening, she was ready to crawl out of her skin. Her shift started at 6 p.m. She arrived early, needing the familiar routine to ground her. The diner was busy with the dinner crowd, families, couples, the usual Saturday chaos. Everything looked normal, felt normal, except the camera was still there. That small black eye watching everything. At 7:30 p.m., Alan walked in. He looked different. Not disheveled like last night's performance, but harder somehow. His suit was immaculate, his movements precise, but there was something in his eyes, a cold focus that reminded Amora of a blade being sharpened. He didn't sit in his usual booth. Instead, he chose a table in the center of the dining area, fully visible, making himself the obvious focal point of the room. Two of his men took positions near the entrance and the kitchen, their presence more obvious than usual. This wasn't about hiding anymore. This was about control. Amora approached with coffee. Evening. Coffee. And whatever's good tonight, Alan said, his voice carrying slightly. Loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Loud enough for a microphone to catch clearly. Meatloaf's fresh. So's the apple pie. Both. Thank you. She poured his coffee, noting the way his phone sat face up on the table. Screen active. Messages scrolling past too quickly for her to read. He was orchestrating something. Coordinating pieces she couldn't see. 20 minutes later, Isabella Russo walked in. She looked tired, hair not quite as perfect as yesterday. Makeup subtle but unable to completely hide the shadows under her eyes. She scanned the diner until she found Alan, then walked over with the careful posture of someone approaching a minefield. You wanted to see me, she said, not sitting down. Sit. Alan's voice was flat, emotionless. Isabella sat, her hands folding on the table in front of her. Defensive body language. Amora had seen it before, people trying to make themselves smaller, less threatening. The warehouse was raided last night, Alan said conversationally, like he was discussing the weather. 3 vehicles, 7 men. They came in expecting to find my inventory. Isabella's face went carefully neutral. I heard. I was going to call you this morning, but you already knew, Alan interrupted. Because you told them it would be there. The air between them crystallized. Isabella's hands tightened, knuckles going white. Alan, I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. He pulled his phone around, showed her something on the screen. From her angle, Amora couldn't see what it was, but she saw Isabella's face go pale. These are access logs from the surveillance feed. The camera in this diner that's been watching me for the past week. Every time I had a conversation here, someone accessed that feed within minutes. And the IP address traces back to your apartment. Isabella, that's impossible. Your building, your floor, your unit. Alan's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. You've been feeding information to Felix Crane for 3 months. Every meeting I take here, every decision I discuss. He's been building a map of my operations, and you've been providing the legend. Isabella's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. She straightened in her seat, and something shifted in her expression, defiance replacing fear. You want to know why? Her voice was low, bitter. Because you stopped seeing us. All of us. We became assets instead of people. Tools you used when convenient and discarded when you were done. I paid you exceptionally well to be that tool, Alan said coldly. Money isn't loyalty, Alan. You used to understand that. You used to care about the people who worked for you. But somewhere along the way, you became exactly what you fought against, someone who values power over people. And selling me out to Crane was your solution? Crane offered me partnership, not employment partnership, a chance to build something of my own instead of being your eternal second in command. Isabella's voice cracked slightly. I gave you 6 years. 6 years of my life, and you never once asked if I wanted more. If I had ambitions beyond managing your properties. Alan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer but no less dangerous. If you wanted more, you should have asked, not betrayed. Would you have said yes? The silence that followed was answer enough. Isabella stood slowly. So what happens now? You make an example of me? You destroy me the way you've destroyed everyone else who disappointed you? No, Alan said quietly. You're going to walk out of here. You're going to go home. And tomorrow morning, you're going to receive a severance package generous. Because unlike you, I honor my commitments. But you're done in this city, Isabella. Every organization, every family, every legitimate business that matters, they'll know what you did. You'll rebuild somewhere else. Or you won't rebuild at all. That's worse than killing me, Isabella whispered. That's the point. Alan's eyes were hard. I don't kill family. But I don't forget betrayal either. Isabella left without another word, her heels clicking against the floor with less confidence than when she'd arrived. The door chimed behind her, and just like that, 6 years of loyalty dissolved into nothing. Amora approached to clear the table, her hands shaking slightly. Was she the only one? No, Alan said quietly. She was the inside source. But someone else placed the camera. Someone else coordinated the raid. And someone else is paying for all of it. Crane? Crane is a middleman, a facilitator, but he's not ambitious enough to orchestrate this alone. Alan's jaw tightened. Someone wanted me distracted, vulnerable. They used Isabella to map my routines, used the camera to watch my reactions, and used Crane to coordinate the actual operation. Who? Before Alan could answer, his phone buzzed. He looked at it, and his expression went completely still, the kind of stillness that preceded violence. They're moving, he said quietly. Right now, they think I'm exposed, destabilized by Isabella's betrayal. They're making their play. What kind of play? Alan stood, pulling cash from his wallet and dropping it on the table too much, as always. The kind that ends with me either dead or removed from power. The kind that requires coordination, resources, and someone I trusted giving them the green light. Who? Amora asked again, more urgently. Alan looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something like regret in his eyes. My lawyer, he said quietly. Mitchell Hayes, the man who's handled my legal affairs for 10 years, the man who knows every asset I own, every weakness in my organization, every contingency plan I've ever made. He's been selling me out piece by piece, using Isabella and Crane as proxies, while he positioned himself to take over everything I've built. Amora's breath caught. How do you know? Because 20 minutes ago, he filed emergency injunctions to freeze my accounts, claiming suspected criminal activity. And he scheduled a meeting with my suppliers for tomorrow morning, a meeting I wasn't invited to. Alan's voice was ice. He's not just betraying me. He's trying to replace me. What are you going to do? Alan's smile was cold and sharp. I'm going to let him think it's working. And then I'm going to show him exactly what happens when you mistake patience for weakness. Mitchell Hayes thought he was winning. Alan knew this because his tech team had intercepted every communication Hayes sent over the past 12 hours. Every email to suppliers suggesting Alan was undergoing personal difficulties. Every text to associates hinting at leadership transitions. Every carefully worded phone call, positioning himself as the stable alternative to Alan's supposed instability. Hayes had built his case methodically. The frozen accounts, the emergency injunctions, the scheduled meeting with key suppliers. On paper, it looked like a responsible attorney protecting assets from a client spiraling out of control. In reality, it was a calculated coup. Sunday morning, Alan sat in a downtown office building, not his usual headquarters, but a neutral space Hayes wouldn't associate with him. Around him sat his core team, his head of security, his financial officer, and the one lawyer he still trusted, a woman named Patricia Reeves, who'd worked in federal prosecution before going private. Hayes filed the injunctions under mental health protocols, Patricia explained, spreading documents across the conference table. He's arguing you've exhibited erratic behavior, the outburst at the diner, the panicked warehouse move, the confrontation with Isabella. He's painted you as unstable. Because I wanted him to, Alan said calmly. Patricia raised an eyebrow. You staged your own mental breakdown? I staged vulnerability. Hayes saw an opening and took it. Now we know exactly what he's been planning. Alan pulled up a recording on his tablet. This is from yesterday evening. Hayes talking to Felix Crane. He pressed play. Hayes's voice came through clearly. Dominato's finished. The accounts are frozen, and by tomorrow afternoon, I'll have control of his supplier network. Once I consolidate operations, we split everything 60-40 as agreed. You provide logistics, I provide legitimacy. Crane's response was cautious. What about Isabella? She served her purpose. Once Dominato's removed, she becomes a liability we can't afford. She knows too much. The recording ended. Patricia sat back, expression grim. That's conspiracy to commit fraud and implied threat of violence. More than enough for criminal charges. I'm not interested in criminal charges, Alan said. I'm interested in exposure. What do you mean? Alan's smile was cold. Hayes thinks he's operating in shadows. He thinks his communications are secure, his plans private. What he doesn't know is that for the past 6 months, every email, every phone call, every document he's created has been copied to a secure server. Not by me, I didn't know he was the leak until 2 days ago, but by someone who suspected him long before I did. Who? Patricia asked. Someone smarter than all of us. Alan pulled up another file. Isabella Russo. Before she betrayed me completely, she was hedging her bets. She didn't trust Hayes, so she started documenting his activities. When she finally committed to selling me out, she kept those files as insurance. And when I confronted her last night, she gave them to me. Not out of loyalty, out of spite. She wanted to make sure if she went down, Hayes went down harder. Patricia scrolled through the documents, her eyes widening. This is comprehensive. Financial records, communication logs, meeting notes. Hayes has been planning this for 18 months. Long before Isabella got involved, Alan confirmed. He used her as a convenient scapegoat, someone to take the fall while he positioned himself as the solution. But Isabella's documentation proves Hayes was the architect. She was just a tool. So what's your play? Patricia asked. Transparency, Alan said. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence gets released. Not to law enforcement, they'll get their copies eventually, but to everyone who matters in my world. Every supplier Hayes is meeting with tomorrow. Every associate he's been quietly recruiting. Every family and organization that works with us. They'll see exactly what he tried to do. That'll destroy him, Patricia said. That's the point. In my world, betrayal is business. People understand ambition, even respect it. But what they can't tolerate is someone who operates through deception while pretending to be your advocate. Hayes positioned himself as the ethical one, the legitimate one. When everyone sees he's been orchestrating this while pretending to protect my interests, he won't just lose credibility, he'll become untouchable. No one will work with him. No firm will hire him. He'll be radioactive. Patricia studied him for a long moment. You're not just removing a threat. You're making an example. I'm telling a story, Alan corrected. The story of what happens when someone mistakes my restraint for weakness. When they think because I don't react immediately, I'm not paying attention. When does the story go public? Patricia asked. In about 3 hours, Alan said, checking his watch. Right before Hayes' meeting with my suppliers, they'll walk into that conference room having just read every detail of his betrayal. And Hayes will realize, maybe for the first time in his life, what it means to be truly exposed. At 11 a.m., Amora's phone buzzed with a news alert. She was home, unable to work, unable to do anything except wait for news. The alert was from a local business journal. Prominent attorney Mitchell Hayes under investigation for fraud conspiracy. She clicked through to the article. It was devastating, every scheme, every betrayal, every conversation documented with surgical precision. The journalist had clearly been given exclusive access to a massive data dump, and they'd published it all. By noon, it was everywhere. Financial news sites, legal blogs, even mainstream media picked it up, the story of a trusted attorney who'd tried to orchestrate a takeover of his own client's empire. Her phone rang. Alan, did you see? He asked. Everyone's seeing it, Amora replied. It's viral. Hayes is finished. Hayes is a cautionary tale, Alan corrected. About surveillance, about trust, about the fact that in the digital age, nothing stays hidden forever. The camera, Amora said suddenly. Are you going to remove it now? No, Alan said. I'm going to leave it exactly where it is. Because whoever hired Hayes, whoever provided the initial funding for this operation, they're still out there. And now they're going to be very, very nervous. You're using it as bait again. I'm using it as a message. Whoever's watching now knows that I found their camera, identified their conspiracy, and dismantled it without ever revealing how much I knew until it was too late. That kind of uncertainty is more powerful than any threat. Amora thought about that, about how Alan had turned a violation into a weapon, had let himself be watched while he orchestrated the Watcher's destruction. What happens to Isabella? She asked. Alan was quiet for a moment. She gets her severance package as promised, and she disappears. She made a choice, and she'll live with the consequences. But she also gave me the evidence that exposed Hayes. That counts for something. Does it? In my world, everything counts. Every action, every choice, every betrayal, and every moment of unexpected integrity. Alan's voice softened slightly. You showed me that, Amora. When you whispered that warning, instead of staying silent, you didn't know what it would cost you or what it might lead to. You just saw something wrong and said something. That's rarer than you think. I just noticed a camera. You noticed what everyone else missed, and you cared enough to speak up. That's not just rare, it's valuable. The line was quiet for a moment. The diner's closed tomorrow, Amora said. Building maintenance. I know. I own the building. Amora blinked. You do? I own most of the block. The diner's been neutral ground for years because I made sure it stayed that way. He paused. When it reopens Tuesday, things will be different. The camera will be gone. Hayes will be gone, and you'll be safe again. Was I ever in danger? Yes, Alan said honestly. If Hayes had succeeded, everyone connected to me would have become a liability, including you. He knew you were observant. He would have dealt with that eventually. The casual way he said it made Amora's blood run cold. She'd been closer to real danger than she'd realized. Thank you, she said quietly, for keeping me out of it. You were never out of it, Alan replied. You were the reason I won. Tuesday morning arrived with unusual clarity, the kind of light that made everything sharp-edged and honest. Amora walked into the Crossroads Diner at 5:45 a.m. for the breakfast shift. The building had been closed for 2 days for maintenance, but stepping inside, she couldn't see any obvious changes. Same counters, same booths, same worn floor tiles that had seen decades of traffic. Except when she looked up at the beam above the prep door, the camera was gone. In its place was just dust, the original, undisturbed layer that should have been there all along. Like the violation had never happened. Like the past 2 weeks had been some fever dream she'd imagined. But her hands remembered the tremor when she'd whispered that warning. Her pulse remembered the spike of fear every time she'd watched someone sit across from Alan, knowing they might be selling him out. Her mind remembered every careful observation, every calculated word, every moment of being more than invisible. Jerry was already behind the counter, starting the coffee machines. He nodded at her. Building inspector found some electrical issues. Got them fixed. We're good now. Good, Amora said, tying her apron. She wondered if Jerry knew what had really been fixed. Probably not. The diner's owner, Alan, apparently would have handled it quietly, the way he handled everything. Remove the threat. Eliminate the evidence. Return to normal as if normal had never been interrupted. The morning shift was steady but unremarkable. Regulars ordered their usual breakfasts. Truckers came and went. A mother with 3 young kids created cheerful chaos in booth 5. Everything was exactly as it should be. Except Alan didn't come in. Not for breakfast. Not for lunch. Not during the afternoon lull when he'd sometimes appear for coffee in silence. By 3 p.m., when her shift ended, Amora felt an unexpected hollowness. She'd spent 2 weeks learning to read his presence, to understand his silences, to participate in a dangerous game she barely understood. And now that the game was over, she was just a waitress again. Invisible again. She was walking to her car when her phone buzzed. Meet me at Riverside Park. East entrance. Amora's heart jumped. She sat in her car for a long moment, staring at the message, then drove across town to the park. Riverside Park was one of those old urban green spaces that had survived development through sheer stubbornness. Trees older than the city's skyline, walking paths that curved along the water, benches where people came to think or hide or remember. Alan was sitting on a bench overlooking the river, dressed casually for the first time she'd seen dark jeans, black Henley, no suit jacket. He looked younger somehow, less armored, more human. You came, he said as she approached. You asked. I requested. There's a difference. He gestured to the bench. Sit. Amora sat, maintaining a careful distance, aware of how different this felt from their previous interactions. No diner counter between them, no performance for cameras, just two people on a bench watching the river move. "Hayes is finished," Alan said quietly. "His law license is under review. His assets are frozen pending investigation. Every client he had is looking for new representation. He'll probably face criminal charges. But even if he doesn't, his career is destroyed. And Crane? Felix Crane is cooperating with authorities in exchange for reduced charges. He's naming everyone he worked with, every operation he facilitated. It'll take down several networks, not just mine." Alan's jaw tightened slightly. Turns out Hayes wasn't just targeting me. He had similar schemes running against 3 other organizations. I was just the biggest prize. "So you weren't paranoid. You were right. Being right doesn't feel as good as you'd think," Alan said. "I lost Isabella. I lost 10 years of trusting the wrong lawyer. I lost the illusion that loyalty meant anything permanent." Amora heard the exhaustion in his voice. "What about the person who hired Hayes initially? You said there was someone above him." "There was. A development consortium that wanted to acquire properties I own. They couldn't buy them legally, so they tried to remove me and install Hayes as a more cooperative owner. We've reached an understanding." The way he said understanding suggested negotiations Amora didn't want details about. They sat in silence for a while, watching joggers pass, listening to the city hum in the distance. "Why did you ask me here?" Amora finally said. Alan reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. "Because you earned this." Amora opened it. Inside was a check more money than she made in 6 months at the diner. "I can't accept this," she said immediately. "You can and you will. You provided intelligence that saved my organization. That's worth compensation." "I just noticed a camera." "You noticed what professionals missed," Alan interrupted. "You spoke up when staying silent was safer. You watched people for me when you could have refused. You participated in something dangerous because you believed it mattered. That deserves recognition." Amora stared at the check, feeling the weight of what it represented. This wasn't payment for service, this was closure. This was Alan telling her their arrangement was over, that she could return to her life, that the dangerous world she'd glimpsed would close behind her like a door she'd never find again. "What if I don't want to be invisible anymore?" The words came out before she could stop them. Alan turned to look at her directly. "What do you mean?" "I mean, for 2 weeks I mattered. What I saw mattered. My observations changed outcomes. And now I'm supposed to go back to serving coffee and pretending I don't see things?" Amora's voice was quiet but intense. "You said I was valuable. Was that just the situation talking, or did you mean it?" Alan was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those dark, calculating eyes. "I meant it," he said finally. "But valuable in my world comes with costs you haven't paid yet. Danger you've only glimpsed. Choices that change who you are. Maybe I want to change. Or maybe you're addicted to feeling important," Alan said, not unkindly. "There's a difference between wanting growth and wanting validation. You need to be sure which one you're chasing." His words hit harder than Amora expected. Was he right? Had she just gotten hooked on the adrenaline of mattering? "Think about it," Alan said, standing. "Keep the check. Take time. If in a month you still want something different, call me. But don't make this decision because you're afraid of being invisible. Make it because you've decided invisibility isn't enough anymore." He started to walk away, then paused. "Amora? Thank you. For everything. Genuinely. You already said that." "I know, but I wanted you to hear it when there weren't cameras watching. When it was just truth, not strategy." He walked away along the river path, hands in his pockets, looking like any other person enjoying an afternoon in the park. But Amora knew better now. She'd seen behind the curtain. She'd learned that power wasn't always loud, that danger often wore expensive suits, and that sometimes the most important thing you could do was whisper 4 words when everyone else stayed silent. She looked at the check in her hands, then at her reflection in the river. For the first time in her life, Amora Miller wasn't sure who she wanted to be, and somehow, that felt like freedom. The check sat on Amora's kitchen counter for 3 days before she deposited it. Not because she didn't need the money her rent was due. Her car needed new tires, and her mother's medical debts still haunted her credit report. But because depositing it felt like accepting that the past 2 weeks were over. Filed away. Finished. On Friday evening, she returned to the Crossroads Diner for her regular shift. The place felt smaller somehow, more ordinary. The magic, or maybe the danger that had transformed it into something significant, had evaporated with the camera's removal. She went through her routine with mechanical precision, poured coffee, took orders, cleared tables, smiled at customers who didn't really see her. By 9 p.m., the dinner rush had faded to the usual handful of late-shift workers and insomniacs seeking pie. Then Alan walked in. Amora's breath caught. She hadn't expected to see him again. Not really. She'd assumed he'd find a new neutral ground. A new place where waitresses didn't know his secrets. But he walked straight to his usual booth back to the wall. Clear sight lines to both entrances, and sat down like he'd never left. Their eyes met across the diner. He nodded once. She grabbed the coffee pot. "Evening," she said, approaching his table with careful neutrality. "Coffee. Black," Alan said, the familiar ritual reasserting itself. She poured, noting that his hands were steady, his expression calm. Whatever storms had raged through his world, they'd passed. Or at least, he'd learned to navigate them. "Anything else?" she asked. "Actually, yes." Alan gestured to the seat across from him. "Sit for a minute?" Amora glanced around. The diner was quiet enough that Jerry wouldn't complain. She slid into the booth, feeling strange sitting where so many dangerous conversations had taken place. "You deposited the check," Alan observed. "How did you—" She stopped. Of course he knew. "Yes. Yesterday. Thank you. It helps more than you know." "Good." He took a sip of coffee, his movements unhurried. "Have you thought about what I said? About what you want?" Amora had thought about little else. She'd replayed their conversation by the river dozens of times, testing his words against her instincts. "I have," she said carefully. "And I think you were right. Part of what I felt was the rush of mattering, of being seen, but that's not a good enough reason to step into your world." Something flickered across Alan's expression. Approval, maybe, or respect. "That's a mature answer," he said. "But," Amora continued, "I also realized something else. I don't want to be invisible forever. I want to build something that matters. On my terms, in my way, not in your world, in mine." "What does that look like?" "I'm not sure yet. Maybe finishing my degree. Maybe starting my own design business. Maybe something I haven't imagined yet." She met his eyes directly. "But I know I don't want to spend the rest of my life pouring coffee and pretending I don't notice things." Alan nodded slowly. "That's a better answer. One with intention instead of just reaction." "Did I pass your test?" Amora asked, unable to hide the slight edge in her voice. It wasn't a test. It was genuine concern. "I've seen people get addicted to proximity to power. It rarely ends well." They sat in silence for a moment. The jukebox played something old and melancholy. A truck rumbled past on the street outside. "Can I ask you something?" Amora said. "Go ahead. Why did you come back here? You could go anywhere, meet people anywhere. Why return to a place that was compromised?" Alan's expression softened slightly. "Because it wasn't the place that was compromised, it was the people. And those people are gone now. This diner is still what it always was. Neutral ground. Safe ground. Sometimes you don't abandon a place just because it was violated. Sometimes you reclaim it." Amora understood what he meant. The camera was gone, but the memory of surveillance remained. By returning, Alan was refusing to let that violation define the space. He was choosing to trust it again, or at least, choosing not to run. "Will you ever really trust anyone again?" she asked quietly. "Probably not the way I used to," Alan admitted. "Hayes taught me that trust without verification is just wishful thinking. But complete isolation isn't living, it's just surviving. So I'll trust carefully, verify constantly, and hope that the people I choose to trust understand why." He finished his coffee and pulled out his wallet, leaving the usual cash with the usual tip. "I should let you get back to work," he said, sliding out of the booth. "Alan?" Amora said as he stood. "Yes? Thank you. For listening to me whisper, for taking me seriously, for treating me like I mattered even when I was just a waitress who noticed something wrong." Alan's expression was unreadable, but his voice was genuine. "You were never just anything, Amora. That's what made you dangerous. You saw everything and everyone underestimated you. That's the most valuable combination in any world." He turned and walked toward the door, his men materializing from wherever they'd been waiting, forming their practiced protective detail. Amora watched him leave, then looked up at the beam where the camera had been. Just dust now. Just a ceiling that no one else would ever think to examine. She picked up her coffee pot and returned to work, moving through the familiar routine with new awareness. She noticed things still did, Always would. The couple in booth 3 whose body language suggested an argument barely contained. The trucker at the counter who kept checking his phone with increasing anxiety. The teenager alone in the corner who was probably supposed to be somewhere else. She saw everything, but now she also understood that seeing wasn't the same as acting. That noticing patterns didn't obligate her to intervene. That sometimes the most powerful thing you could do with observation was choose what to do with it. The diner's neon sign buzzed overhead, casting its familiar red glow across worn vinyl and scratched countertops. Outside, the city continued its endless motion, people moving through their lives, most of them never knowing how close they came to the dangerous currents that flowed beneath the surface. Amora refilled coffee cups and cleared plates, invisible again to most. But she knew something now that she hadn't known before. Invisibility was a choice, not a condition. And when she was ready, when she'd built something of her own, on her own terms, she'd choose to be seen. Not because someone else had given her permission, but because she'd earned it. The camera was gone. The danger had passed. The diner was just a diner again. But Amora Miller was no longer just a waitress. She was someone who'd whispered truth to power and lived to tell about it. And that, she decided, was enough. For now. Thanks for staying with this story right till the final moment. You're the reason these stories come alive. If you're ready for another powerful journey, just tap the next video on your screen. And before you go, leave a quick comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I'm excited to see your thoughts and connect with you down there.
А все равно, как бы, ну, сути дела не меняет, как бы зарплата плюс-минус везде там, ну, больше, чуть меньше. Как бы, и, наверное, это все, вот эта общая ситуация, наверное, у многих привела, во-первых, сфера развлечений, да, всякие там кредиты и так далее, настолько загоняют каждого в задницу человека. И об этом на самом деле никто так-то не говорит. Какое количество сейчас, допустим, даже в те же сложные времена такие, когда после там, специальная военная операция, да, где люди вообще умирают, в принципе, за какую-то сумму денег. Ну, то есть, какая мотивация, то есть, у мужика идти, типа, на войну, воевать и, ну, как бы заработать денег? Потому что он вот в обычной жизни не понимает, типа, как реализовать себя. Ну, он понимает, что он может пойти работать на какую-то работу, где зарплаты его все равно не будет хватать. Как бы тут тоже двойственная сторона. Хорошо, когда она есть, плохо, когда ее нету. Да, вот это маленькая даже зарплаты. Но морально-то ты все равно подавлен. Ты понимаешь, да, я там пойду туда, но как бы смысла мне этого не принесет большого. Да, у меня там станет, если я вообще не работаю и буду работать за 50 тысяч, хорошо, что они у меня есть, я смогу там покушать себе купить, но это же дизмораль. Когда ты заходишь в интернет и видишь, как люди там в Дубае летают, покупают себе огромное количество автомобилей какие-то, ну, много всего такого, что ты за эту зарплату себе никогда в жизни позволить не сможешь. И как человеку оставаться морально, типа, сильным? Что ему нужно делать? Ну, наверное, во-первых, это, наверное, все от семьи исходит, да? То есть, какая семья у тебя, как она построена. Если ты один живешь, это сложно, да, ты будешь сам себя, но у тебя, опять-таки, возможно, ну, родители, если есть, которые друзья поддержат тебя в какой-то момент, хотя бы просто отвлекут тебя от этих мыслей. А если у тебя, к примеру, там, семья, жена, к примеру, да, есть дети, то тут, наверное, поддержка только от них исходит какая-то. Вот. Чтобы не упиваться в своих мыслях о том, что какая нынче сложная жизнь. И, наверное, других-то вариантов, в принципе-то, и нету. Какие вот еще варианты, в принципе, изменить, поменять свою жизнь настолько, чтобы она была, ну, казалась тебе удачной, да, реализованным себя в жизни, в чем-то. В чем, вот как проявляется на самом деле у нас реализованность? Наверное, у 90% случаев это финансовое благополучие, финансовая независимость. Это, наверное, одно из таких ключевых моментов, когда человек, наверное, считает себя реализованным, да, в этой жизни. То есть, как добиться этого? То есть, с учетом того, что даже возьмем нашу страну, да, сколько миллионов людей здесь живет, как каждому добиться этого результата? Непонятно. И с каждым годом просто ситуация становится все хуже и хуже. Все дорожает, люди зарабатывают либо столько же. Ну, даже если они зарабатывают столько же, на самом деле этого все уже недостаточно. К чему это все приведет на самом деле? В оконцове, наверное, мир погрязнет в большую депрессию в какую-то. Какие-то войны, возможно, или еще что-то еще больше глобальных таких вещей, которые не приведут ни к чему хорошему на самом деле. Поддержка каждого человека именно для того, чтобы он держался, наверное, морально, заключается в том, что, ну, наверное, дом, в который ты приходишь, должен быть крепостью твоей, да, что это единственное должно быть место, где ты будешь чувствовать себя под защитой. Для этого было придумано, наверное, своя пещера изначально, потом свои какие-то чумы, палатки различные, да, потом все это превратилось, на данный момент это у нас дома, квартиры, в которые мы приходим и должны ощущать себя в безопасности, чтобы можно быть немного морально расслабленным с учетом того, что ты выходишь каждый день на работу, на улицу, и все равно давление вот это вот, оно все присутствует. Когда ты заходишь в магазин, видишь цены эти, да, и так далее, не можешь себе что-то там приобрести, позволить на ежедневной основе, это откладывает большой, наверное, отпечаток. Не, наверное, а точно. И поэтому, когда возвращаясь домой, ты чувствуешь, вот хотя бы есть типа уголок того места, куда ты можешь прийти. Уголок на самом деле человеку много тоже не надо. Можно хотеть большего, но на самом деле человеку одному много не надо. Да? Ему нужно спальное место, спокойное место, где можно подумать. Ну, это когда ты один, к примеру, да? Когда у тебя есть семья, к примеру, ты приходишь домой, опять-таки, и тут хотя бы, да, поговорить о каких-то вещах. Просто об отрешенных вещах, наверное. И, возможно, при этих же условиях у тебя и появляется какая-то дополнительная мотивация для реализации себя. А когда у тебя нету ничего, вот это уже становится проблемой. И это у многих на самом деле. Что значит не иметь ничего? Тут, наверное, самое главное, дизмораль у человека еще возникает при том, что это уже, наверное, где-то в глубине души даже она возникает при даже хорошей финансовой подушке такой, которая у тебя есть, хороших финансовых деньгах, да, то есть, но нету вот внутреннего ощущения, к примеру, дружбы, семьи, любви и так далее. Это уже отдельно на самом деле разговор, потому что мы, вот, к примеру, можем взять, как сейчас вот Новстрой, если кто-то смотрит, насколько тяжело обладать такими финансами и не иметь, по сути, ничего. Ни друзей, ничего не иметь. Так главное, это получается Для бедных главное деньги, для богатых главное какое-то внутреннее ощущение нужности, не из-за денег. Вот такой вот. И эта борьба какая-то такая и вот эти два слоя общества, богатые и бедные, они друг друга не понимают. На самом деле из-за этого, возможно. Потому что богатый человек, он уже не смотрит на деньги, он не считает эти деньги. Ему важно внутреннее вот это вот ощущение того, что он нужен без них даже. Это как Тони Старку сказали: а кто ты без костюма? На вот это я филантроп, тудым-сюдым, он сказал, да? Так и человеку, у которого много денег, ты задашь вопрос: а кто ты без денег? Ну, что ты представляешь себе без денег? Вот и это, наверное, возможно, таких людей богатых, как вот, например, там Мелстрой, задав ему этот вопрос: а кто ты без денег? Он на него ответить-то и не сможет. Обратная сторона людей бедных, да, вот если мы посмотрим, человеку